Great. Okay, this is a presentation that Kurt Hansen did at the RAIN Summit with the NAB back in September, but most of the information is still very accurate, and unfortunately I didn't have a black turtleneck, and I combed my hair this morning. I should have just left it the way I woke up, and then maybe I'd look a little more like
Still copying Kurt's homework.
That's right. That's it exactly. The mad scientist. A little bit about who AccuRadio is and Kurt and so on, and what we're doing is Kurt puts out the RAIN newsletter, which is a daily newsletter about what's going on in internet radio, and it's free. If you don't subscribe to it, just go on kurthansen.com and sign up for it. We also have AccuRadio, which is our consumer brand, which we have 500 channels of music on the internet, which are personalizable. We have specific brands. We are the leading provider of jazz, classical, Broadway, and I'm probably forgetting something, Celtic and so on, of music on the internet. And we have specific brands too, smooth jazz especially. We also have a private label division that does private label work. We're in the process of talking to a number of radio groups about private labeling our technology with their radio stations. We've done it for clients. We did Tetley Tea, we did all British songs. We did 8 O'Clock Coffee. We had a channel for them, all coffee songs, and so some of them are a lot of fun. But we think that there's a big change going on, and radio's going through a lot of periods of change, and we think radio has the opportunity to experience the fourth golden age. You remember the first golden age, which was all about long content programming. And radio at the time was the #1 choice for entertainment. And then something came along called television, and all the long-form programming went over to TV, and radio, to its credit, reinvented itself with disc jockeys and playing hit music, and had another wonderful run of providing entertainment for America and making a lot of money. Anybody know who the one in the middle is? Sitting? Very good. And the one in the top left?
Uncle Larry.
Uncle Larry. Larry Lujak.
Art Roberts on the left.
Yeah, it was Art, yes. And then something came along called FM. And music migrated from AM to FM because of low commercial load, more variety, and technical quality stereo. But AM also rebounded and embraced talk radio. And so again, radio, through changing itself and adjusting, went through another golden age. Well, then something happened. We started to have listener fatigue because of tight playlists and high commercial load. Consolidation, in my mind, I was a fan of consolidation, except I think it went the wrong way. Instead of consolidation being used to improve programming, it was used to cut costs. And I think it went the wrong way. It could have helped the industry, and it ended up, I think, in the end, hurting the industry. And the internet, the rise of the internet has come up. So the golden age, we think, is now, and I wanted to go through what some of the characteristics we think are of the golden age of radio. First is personalization. This is the #1 reason people listen to internet radio, is for personalization, because it gives them control. And the internet is all about control. You can have a skip button, you can have a pause button, so if you have to walk away, you can stop what you're listening to. You don't like a song, you can skip it. You can thumbs up, thumbs down, songs that you like or dislike, and influence the play. And the major players out there right now are only 4 companies. There's Pandora, Slacker, Last.fm, and AccuRadio. It's interesting, radio stations in the past, the brand was always about the music. You were the rock station, the CHR, the smooth jazz station. In internet, it's all about the user experience. It's the system that you use to listen. Pandora is not about one type of music. AccuRadio is not about one type of music. The brand is the user interface. The second characteristic is variety. One of the reasons, by the way, people migrated from AM to FM was for more variety. Well, now we're seeing a migration again because of variety. I'm sure you've all familiar with The Long Tail by Chris Anderson that talks about, really about how Amazon got started. Radio, because of the limited frequencies, has to pretty much focus on hit formats, where the most listeners are. But we know listeners have far more taste than that. There is a long tail of formats, from classical to standards to indie rock, classical, jazz, electro. I mean, it goes on and on. On terrestrial and internet radio, there's space for the Beatles. Anybody know this band? I think it's In Excess. I'm not positive. But there's room for them on terrestrial radio and on internet radio. But with the loss of a lot of smooth jazz formats, artists like Diana Krall, suddenly there's not room for somebody like this on terrestrial radio. There's not room for Billie Holiday on terrestrial radio. Josh Groban and Paul Potts. Ukulele music, comedy music. These are all tastes that people have that isn't room for on terrestrial radio, even something like this. And by the way, Kurt's a big Star Trek fan, so you're going to see lots of Star Trek little references. But you know, there's even room for an album like this on the internet. And even the long tail has long tails. We have a Broadway channel that has over 20 different channels of types of Broadway, from music by era, music by composer, and so on. So the long tail even has long tail within the formats. So there is infinite variety available on the internet. The third is low spot load. Surprise, surprise, that's why music migrated from AM to FM. Well, now it's migrating again because of low spot load. Most internet radio companies only play 4 to 5 commercials an hour. On the study that Edison and Arbitron did a year ago, the #1 reason was being able to control. Variety was second, and fewer commercials was the third reason people are interested in listening to music on the internet. And most companies only stop 2, 3, 4 times an hour at best. At AccuRadio, we play 4 commercials an hour, 1 commercial each quarter hour. The fourth characteristic, ubiquity. You don't need a radio to listen to radio. It's available in the office, on the street, in the home, and clearly in the car. And we're not limited to your neighborhood anymore. The internet allows radio to be global. And all this is happening as we talk. The study that was done a year ago shows that that listening was at 43 million last year to internet radio. But we already know that Pandora has 75 million registered users. So it would be interesting to see what this number is when the new numbers come out. We're able to measure our listening by actual listeners. It's not an estimate. With Ando, we're able to measure exactly who's listening to our stations in 5-minute increments. You can sit there all day long and watch the bars keep moving up or down, depending on how people listen. This is what the domestic ranker looks like that Ando puts out, and it shows that Pandora is clearly #1. I want to take you through a little exercise here of what's happening with the growth of internet radio. Pandora, back in January last year, had 257,000 average quarter hour. By the middle of the year, they had 366,000 quarter hours. I don't have the new number, I don't have up there, but the new number is now 542,000. If you take the top 20 rated webcasters, that comes out to 780,000 quarter hours. If you add in all the other webcasters that are out there, Kurt made an estimate that it's about 1.3 million quarter hours that are listening to internet radio right now. Radio's quarter hour is 34 million. So internet radio, as of the middle of last year, had about all of internet radio had about a 3.8 share of radio listening, kind of like FM was back in 1971. Now let's look at Pandora and what's happening with Pandora. If you take that 366,000 quarter hours that they had in the middle of last year, and divide it into the, look at the 1.3 million of internet listening, Pandora, in the middle of last year, represented almost 30% of the internet listening that's out there, one company. That represents one share of radio listening. That's like Pandora by the middle of last year was essentially a one-share radio station in every market. Based on where they are now, they are probably now a two-share radio station in all of our markets. Think what it would cost to own a two-share radio station in every market in the country. And their valuation right now is $1 billion. It would cost far more than $1 billion to own a two-share radio station in every market in the country. So it is clearly a very formidable company. And the pace is accelerating. We think that the line is going to start like this, and primarily because of the mobile device. The mobile device used to look like this. That's what we thought it was going to look like. That was a tricorder. It was a sensor, a data recorder, and it was used for communication. Now, yeah, yes. Now we have an icosicorder. This does everything. The least thing it does is being used as the phone. It has become really a portable data device that people are now using. And it includes internet radio. 20% of the population now has smartphones. And we're seeing the rise of in-home devices. From the study that Edison and Arbitron did, more than 6 in 10 homes now have access to Wi-Fi networks. So it allows things like this to be developed. And the tablet computer. We thought that was exciting when they had that in Star Trek. Now we've got this. And what this tablet allows us to do is tremendous graphics. This is what our app looks like when you're using AccuRadio on a device like this. And frankly, it's already getting into the dashboard. You can already do it in the dashboard. And it was interesting. I think Sean, where's Sean? You had this in your takeaway from the CRS. Is listeners said that they would choose AM and FM 40% to 35% over Pandora when both were available in the dash. So the people know what Pandora is. They know what internet radio is. And terrestrial radio is not, given the choice, it's not an overwhelming choice. It was 40% to 35%. So the question is, are broadcasters going to step up? The listeners are looking for control and variety in music. Radio stations are pushing live and local. Pandora, AccuRadio, Slacker, Last.fm are pushing control and variety. We know simulcasts aren't happening. Look at what's happening in the domestic ranker from July of last year. Look at all the pure play internet companies that are starting to populate the ranker. And if you look at this graph, the yellow line there is the addition of the top 5 broadcasters. And you can see what's happening with simulcast streams. The audience it's either flat or dropping, and the line going up is Pandora. It reminds me of those lines back, when we, AM versus FM, and we showed the tremendous growth of FM. We're seeing the same things with Pandora and internet radio. Susan talked earlier. We were talking about the project up here and about how habitual thinking limits the ability of businesses, and success is the enemy of change. Well, The Innovator's Dilemma, our book, was written about how companies have difficulty bridging technological divides and new ideas because they're limited by their current thinking. NBC was the mass television network, provided the programming that America watched, programs like Star Trek. In the sale that just happened with Comcast, the network was worth a negative $600 million. That used to be where America got its entertainment. It is now a negative worth. The stations were only worth $4 billion in that deal. So where was all the value in that deal? Cable. That was $32.7 billion of valuation in that merger deal. Do you think you heard this at the network when people were talking about should we get into the cable business? I sure heard it back when we had FM stations and what we were trying to do from the AM broadcasters. Won't this cannibalize my audience? But the answer then, and frankly the answer to the TV networks and the answer now is if you don't do it, somebody else will. And so the question is, will broadcasters step up? In addition, internet-delivered radio is the biggest growth opportunity radio has. It's like the days, again, of FM. You should want to be there. This is another distribution channel, and it's a channel that broadcasters, I think, need to be a part of. So, we've had wonderful golden ages. The question is, will broadcasters step up and participate and make it a fourth golden age? We know that the audience is growing and probably going to explode in growth. Internet radio, as of last summer, was up to a 3.8 share. It's probably over a 4 share now. As Wayne Gretzky said one time, he doesn't skate to where the puck is, he skates to where the puck's going to be. And if broadcasters are visionaries and look to the future and embrace internet radio and personalizable radio, they can have a bright new day. And I have some interesting numbers that I want to share. Let's see if I can get out of this. Some growth numbers from November to December. Pandora grew in 1 month 10%. Slacker grew 25%. AccuRadio grew 30%. The top 5 broadcasters grew 3%. That was from November to December of this year. The top 5 broadcasters are also down 3% from a year ago. So they're growing slower this year, and even that growth is less than they were last year. Pandora, by the way, year to year is up 107%. So clearly there's something happening. And I have one other chart I want to show, if I can figure out how to get out of.
When you start to realize, when these different media reach their critical mass, and we're talking decades, and now we're talking a couple of years. Charlie Sheen, I understand mass media make him and they destroy him, but he got over 1 million Twitter followers in 25.17 hours or something. That's like a new Twitter record for amassing over 1 million followers.
It's just very sad.
Very sad.
Yeah, it was very sad. Yeah.
But again, it shows you how the technology is changing and impacting us. When something like that can happen in 25 hours, you can get over 1 million followers. That's bad. Everybody likes
traditional media certainly helped him out.
Yeah.
Well, without that,
there we go.
How does Steve Jobs promote all of his new products?
Yeah. This is
Dinosaur media, right?
that graph I showed that showed the middle of the year. This is the updated one as of the end of the year. So you can see the continued growth of Pandora. You can see the yellow line represents the top 5 terrestrial broadcasters. And they are essentially flat. So the simulcast stream has peaked. Because again, it's offering nothing different. It was like when we simulcast AM on FM. There were a certain number of people that listened to our FM simulcast because they couldn't get the AM signal. But there was nothing unique or different just by simulcasting AM and FM. FM exploded when it did something different. And that's the same thing with the internet. Just simulcasting, not that you shouldn't be there, but just simulcasting your signal offers nothing new to the consumer. You have to embrace the new distribution channel and use it the way the consumers are using it. And it gives you, shows some of the other companies, most everybody is flat. Thank you.
The other thing is only one thing really, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, one thing distinguishes Pandora, and that's that premise that you get to program your own station, right? That whole idea of you put in the song and it sort of is customized to you. That's their point of differentiation. That's really.
Well, again, it's personalization. The personalization is the holy grail. That's the thing that differentiates these internet companies, Pandora, Slacker, Last.fm, and AccuRadio from everybody else. Again, it's the ability to control what they want. The consumer wants that control. And we can argue about, is it still somewhat of a push medium, et cetera. But the point is, when you can skip a song, and it's amazing. I ride around in my car and I'm listening to a terrestrial radio station, and boy, if I could just skip past that song I don't like, that'd be a wonderful thing. And you can't do that, and neither can satellite radio.
John, what are they going to do about this rights issue in terms of licensing? Because right now they're overpromising and underdelivering. Because when I know I can, if the true promise to me is that I can skip a song, I'm pretty pissed after 3 songs that I can't skip anymore. I have to open up a new station. Well, they're going to have to fix that.
And that, you know what, that will get fixed. All the objections that people have had to things growing that involve technology, like bandwidth and so on, all those are being solved as we move forward. The rights issue will get solved because it's becoming so big and so important to the labels, they're going to need internet radio. And frankly, the fact that broadcasters are now considering having to pay some sort of fee, I think is, in the long run, is going to cause Congress to look at the whole scheme and say, we can't have these uneven payments. We're going to have something that's fair.
And that could impact their velocity.
Could, absolutely. So, but as bad as the model is, it's still a workable model for the first time. 3 years ago, the internet radio model was unworkable because of the rights. It's gotten better, and the more successful it is, I think the more reasonable the labels are going to be, because they need it. It does a wonderful thing. I mean, when you can click on a song that you're listening to on AccuRadio or Pandora and buy it on the spot, that's a terrific, it's a terrific process.
John, a Coleman study reported that the attributes that the streamer is looking for is different than the attributes that a terrestrial radio listener is looking for. The streamer is looking for fast buffering, few commercials, variety, and personalized stations versus personalities, local weather, local traffic, local event information. When does that merge? And I mean, is it fair to compare terrestrial streams to online streams?
Well, again, it's like simulcasting AM and FM. If you're going to take advantage of the medium or the distribution channel, then you have to take advantage of it the way the listeners are using it. And they're using it for personalization, all those things that you talked about. They're not using it because they're not using it to hear their favorite terrestrial radio station unless they can't get it or they want to listen on a device out of the area. So, so does that, am I answering?
Well, yeah, I mean, in my question, I guess there was sort of a statement. I mean, I think about, and it's always dangerous when you project yourself, but I've been carrying around an iPhone since they first came out.
Right here.
Oh, okay.
It's been buzzing.
Instant panic. The stock market report that I used to get from radio, I now get on my iPhone. Traffic reports are far better, in my mind, on the iPhone or on my iPad than they are on radio. Weather, I've got much more up-to-date information than I can get on a radio station. So a lot of the things that I used to get from a radio station, I get on that iPhone. And I can't imagine that I'm alone in that.
Well, I think it's going to force terrestrial broadcasters to rethink what they're doing. And so maybe doing traffic on the 8s at some point in time, and the question is, when do the lines cross?
Right.
In other words, when is more of that information available on the internet so that the radio station's audience, it becomes unimportant? Just like you don't hear school closings anymore in radio.
Right.
Used to be, that's where you went. If you lived in a town, you went to your local radio station to find out if the schools were closed when there was a snowstorm. Now they either call you on a phone bank or you go to the website and find it out. There's no reason for radio stations to do that anymore. And so radio stations have moved off of it. And so I think it's forcing radio to examine at points in time what does my audience want and what doesn't it want. And I think that those things beyond music, because music's migrating, you know, is again, it didn't stay on AM, but AM survived and rediscovered itself by providing something that wasn't being provided well before. And FM stations are going to have to do that too. You know, what does the audience want? What can I give them in my local community? As you mentioned, you know, what can I do? What kind of personality can I put on the air that can do something that they can't get anywhere else? And that's going to cause, you know, a redistribution of the types of listeners that stations have. Will they have as many listeners as they do now? I don't know. I don't think terrestrial radio will go away, but you're not going to have the model that you have now. And it may even, you know, like I say, you may not even have as many listeners as you do now, but you'll have a different audience that will still have value. All make sense? Let's see. You're shaking your head.
No,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm with you.
Oh, okay.
I don't like the idea.
No, I don't.
I'm certainly with you.
It's a lot of work.
Oh, it's a lot of work.
It's a lot more work.
It's back where we were.
Yes.
I didn't see you come in.
One interesting exercise is to take a look at the chart of the network television audience share of viewers from like 1960 to the present, and you see it literally drop below 50% of what it was around 1970 when cable, you know, started happening.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you look at the TVB television network revenue from 1960 to the present, it's actually been straight up, despite a 50% drop in audience share. That gives us a little bit of comfort in radio that it's possible that the revenue won't be at least exactly proportionate to the audience.
You're right. You know, television.
You've got inflation, of course, helping.
Television held on for a long time because it still remained the best way to reach a mass audience, and it still does. But it was a very, you know, as television numbers went down for viewers, the revenue didn't track it for quite a while. But what you'd find is lines will go like this for a while, and then there will be a moment in time when something dramatic happens. And then you see a drop. So it doesn't just go like this to the very end. Trends tend to go like this, and then something dramatic happens, and then there's a big drop, and it happens overnight. And look at television revenue now. Now it's not up anymore. They've all had terrible years. NBC was sold. GE knew what the trend line was. They got out of it because it didn't fit their motto anymore. And so, you know, now we're, you know, even my wife watches her favorite shows on her computer. And so television, I think that loss of audience and the way people use television is going to change much more dramatically, as well as revenue.
Somebody said earlier that the best way for companies to embrace innovation is probably to acquire companies that are innovating with leaders, you know, leading those companies that have the big idea. And there was one guy who you would be familiar with, John, Leonard Goldenson, who had two moments in time in media where he was absolutely brilliant and on target. The first was, he started out as president of Paramount Theaters in the 40s after the theater division was spun out by the Justice Department Antitrust Division. And Paramount Pictures made movies and distributed them, but couldn't exhibit them because that was considered a monopoly. So Goldenson is stuck with this huge chain of movie theaters. In the 40s, they were still doing really well. But then television came along in the late 40s. And he used to hear questions at the board meetings of Paramount Theaters, you know, Leonard, is this television thing going to kill the movie? I mean, people are going to just stay at home, they'll never go to movie theaters again. We're going to be dead. So finally, at one board meeting, the question came up, and Leonard said, well, I have a solution to it. I've just made a deal, and I want to propose board approval to buy a little company called American Broadcasting Company, which has 5 TV stations, not much going on, but it's a way to get into television. And the board member said, how can you do that? I mean, this is the this is the competition that's going to kill us, and we're going into it? And he says, well, if we're that afraid of it, shouldn't we be in? He did it again in 1975 with a lot of backlash from the ABC television affiliates when he announced an investment in 2 cable channels in 1975, ESPN and A&E.
And he said the same thing. If we're so afraid of cable, we should be in it. And those were two brilliant.
I'll offer a third one of, again, the only way for FM to grow in the company was for him to split it off from the AM stations and run it as a division. And I remember I was on the AM side, and boy, I hated those people down at DAI on the 4th floor because they were competing with me.
We know you did.
Yeah.
Marty Greenberg used to steal
Oh,
all our best salesmen.
you bet.
He'd steal them for WLS.
But you know what? We both were better radio stations, and we had a bigger audience combined than if we had fought it. But that was the only way for the FM to grow, was to split it off and give it to new thinking, and so on. And I remember at CBS, I went to run CAU-FM in Philadelphia as program director, and again, ABC was already doing their stuff, and CBS was still running the Youngsound tapes. So you look at what was the best way to do it, and I had to report to the general manager of the AM station to explain what we were doing, down in this little studio that he gave us in the bowels of the building. So anyway, so thank you all.
There was another
Yeah.
interesting point on the development of FM, which may be a guidepost for what we ought to be doing today, and unfortunately it's still true. Even as early as 1970, advertising agencies were already making it very clear that they were really interested in 25-54 audience. They really didn't care about teen or 55 plus. So those of us who got involved in FM early around 1968 or 69 saw two huge unserved segments of the population. 25% of the population in the U.S. is around 55 plus. I mean, it's 55 plus. The other 25% is 24 and younger, 12 to 24, or 6 to 24. And what FM succeeded on was doing two formats. The older end, it was beautiful music, Jim Schulke and Harold Peterson, those people that did the beautiful music, instrumental formats on FM. And those of us that did album rock for the lower end, the 18 to 24, because they were not being served by AM radio at all. That's still true today. Radio has abandoned the under 25 for the most part, and the over 55. There's no real programming for them other than maybe conservative talk on AM and talk programming in general. But there's an opportunity with our HD channels and online streaming and a number of other things where we can serve the totally unserved demos, which is, by the way, half of the U.S. population. It's not a small segment, it's huge.